In a recent video, I talked about how it is appropriate as a female to gain weight in your 20s, even though you're of course staying the same height. That's actually a part of normal female adolescent growth, but it's something that's not often talked about. So today I want to go over a case study of someone who this happened to. Now, this particular individual is 26 years old. She's 5'1", and before coming to see us had gained some weight. Her typical weight prior to coming to see us was about 115 pounds, and she had gained to about 125, and she was really worried that this was a problem. So what she had done before coming to see us was actually, you guessed it, started to restrict her intake and was logging her food and trying to eat only 1,200 calories or less. And as a result, we saw some impacts, of course, in her metabolic rate and her body composition that we'll go over in just a second. Now, the reason I really want to bring up this case is because what we figured out is that this new weight for this person, this 125-ish, was actually more appropriate for her body and where her body wanted to be, just solidifying that fact that it is okay and sometimes appropriate to gain weight in your 20s, even if you're staying the same height. Now, taking a look at her first metabolic test, there's a second one that we'll go over in a minute, but this was her initial metabolic test. You can see that her resting metabolic rate was just a little bit too low. Now, of course, it's not drastically low like in some of the cases that we've seen, but it is a little bit too low. And this is telling me that the body's starting to compensate for her not taking in enough food because she was trying to stick to only 1,200 calories or less. Keep in mind, she was also exercising about an hour, sometimes a little bit more every day. And that exercise would range from either like a hike or a run or a bike ride, mostly cardio based. So her metabolic rate was a little bit too low, and that protein substrate or breakdown of muscle and lean mass was a little bit too high. Now, if we take a look at her body composition, and I'll go over the rest of these numbers in a minute, but let's just look at that first one. This was her very first visit, right? What you can see is this is the weight, like I told you, it was 125 when she came in because she had gained that weight before coming to see us and frankly came to us hoping that we could get her back down to a lower weight. But what I want to point out about the lean mass and fat mass on this top line, the January 2018, is that those numbers were actually right within that normal range. So all of these numbers are compared to normal ranges for people of similar age, height, etc. And these were right there. They were actually in the bottom end of that range, a little bit low. They weren't too low, but just on the bottom end of that range. So this just kind of tells me that actually her body's probably okay here. But regardless, we did try to make some changes to her nutrition. Now, of course, first and foremost, what we did is actually work on getting her to take in a little bit more food, right? And so with her resting metabolic rate being a little bit low, we want to improve that. We want to get it up to that 1,300, which was more normal for her, if not a little bit higher. So regardless, we're gonna use that number as kind of our baseline. We're gonna add for the fact that she's getting up and moving around and add for the exercise. So this person, we actually started having eat more like 1,900 to 2,000 calories a day. And she noticed immediately that she felt better. She didn't even realize that her energy was low, and she didn't even realize the bloating. She noticed that she was bloated, but didn't think it had anything to do with little food, which of course it did. So right away, when we increased that 19 to 2,000 range, she noticed better energy and her persistent bloating went down. So we brought her calories up to that, right? Which was excellent for her and way better. And it was fueling her runs and her exercise more. We allowed her to keep doing the exercise that she was doing to the point where she was noticing just like better stamina, better energy during the workouts and all of those things. So by increasing her intake, let's take a look at her second metabolic test. So as you can see at this second metabolic test a few months later, that her metabolism had improved to the point where it was actually a little bit above where we predicted to be, which is perfectly normal. This now tells us that her metabolic rate is kind of corrected, and we have gotten it to adapt kind of back up to where it should be so that she doesn't have to starve herself. What you'll also see is that protein substrate or breakdown of lean mass and muscle is back to normal, and everything is looking much more appropriate. Now, let's take a look at the body composition results, and I'll go over those second two results. So as you can see here, these body composition results, you're like, well, they kind of look the same. And exactly. So the reason why I wanted to point this out is for, well, a couple reasons, honestly. First and foremost, this just solidifies to me that this new weight of this 125, 126-ish pounds is where her body wants to be. Yes, she did gain a little bit of lean mass and frankly, a little bit of fat during this time period, but that's perfectly okay. Her body is now in a much better place. She's eating about 1,900 to 2,000 calories a day still. She's still doing the exercise that she wants, and her body has stayed right here. Now, you're probably wondering like, okay, well, what's the point? The point is that it was perfectly appropriate for her to gain from that 115 pounds to this now 125, 126 range. And so despite the fact that not much changed per se with her body composition, we did see those positive changes with her metabolic rate. Remember, her metabolism came up, her body was no longer breaking down too much of her lean mass, and her body composition stayed mostly the same. Now, you're probably thinking like, okay, well, how did she feel? She's the one who wanted to lose weight. And I'm glad you asked because she felt great. This was so helpful for her learning that this is where her body wants to be. And we know that because over this whole time period, she did try a few different things. Like from January to July, she tried a little bit of a different workout. She tried kind of changing food just slightly, not bringing it down, but just kind of changing, adjusting what she was eating, etc. And no matter what, her weight stayed within this range. So her body needed to gain this weight when she gained from 115 to 125. And this is her body's new set point as a healthy, happy adult. She's eating an appropriate amount of food. She's doing exercise that she loves. And all of this is great. So all of that to say, sometimes it's okay that your body has gained some weight. Maybe it needed to, and maybe this is actually a better place for where your body should be. So don't forget to like and subscribe. If you have any questions on this case, please leave them in the comments. I know this one was a little bit different than our usual, but I wanted to share it because sometimes we just need that affirmation that we're doing the right things for our bodies by eating well and doing movement that you love.